All right, and welcome back again to the Paisan Sports podcast presented by Recliner Media. Dante DePlacido, joined as always by Zach Deal of What's the Deal Sports. So I've got to ask, what what's the deal with Daryl Morey? All right, I mean, you know, he trades Jared McCain for a late first round pick, 3 seconds. In a year where this is a team that's ready to be competitive, so you think, okay, well, probably going to use those picks for a bigger trade, and then doesn't make another trade. There was no bigger trade. You just traded away an important bench piece for some picks. And now you have Kyle Lowry at 40 years old out there getting minutes. I want to say this has to do with Josh Harris wanting to duck the luxury tax, one of the worst owners in professional sports. Also, notably showed up on some files recently. We're not going to get into that, but I'm just throwing that out there. So what's going on?
I actually had a separate what's the deal. I was going to text you about it, but I wanted to save it for the podcast today. What's the deal with the Italian men's national hockey team being plus 3,500 in their matchup tomorrow?
I did not know about that. That's pretty crazy. I don't need it. The only Olympics I'm really ready to follow is the Jamaican bobsled team for obvious reasons. So I didn't really know about
Is there hot girls on there or something?
What? No, you've never seen the movie Cool Runnings? Feel the rhythm, feel the
I
ride,
told you
come on
we've
up.
had
It's
numerous
bobsled time.
If you've known me for the past 4 years since we've known each other, you know that I don't really watch movies like that. So
It's a classic sports movie. I don't know how you've never seen it.
classic sports movie. The first thing that pops in my brain is the Agent movie.
What movie?
The Agent movie. Was that with Tom Cruise back in the day?
I'm not even sure what you're referring to.
The movie that you had me at hello is the one. Was it I don't know. I'm drawing a blank at the name. It's like one of the most popular sports movies of all time. But regardless,
Anyway.
Honestly, the way that the NBA works, and if you look around the rest of the league, like if you in comparison, the trade really wasn't that bad. I just don't know how much sense it makes, but not to toot my whistle once again, Dante, but I felt like when we were dry for topics in the summer, I kept talking about the fear of Jared McCain getting traded, and it has finally happened after probably the 25th mention.
And it's one of the worst trades in recent history for the Sixers, in my opinion.
I couldn't disagree more. I wouldn't exaggerate it to that level because look at some of the trade we gave up on Jason Tatum. Pretty much gave our arch rivals. It's almost like,
well, I said one of. Yeah, obviously that one's the worst.
if we're talking,
but during the Joel Embiid era, I would say that trade. I would kind of say the sign-in trade of Jimmy Butler for Josh Richardson, but I mean Jimmy Butler was on his way out regardless. And
the George Hill trade was really bad, which he pretty much did nothing for the Sixers.
Yeah, but that was an instance where they just acquired a guy that didn't really work out. I would say getting rid of a guy.
If we're just looking at the talent, if we're like just looking at the talent, yeah, it's not the best move, but 4 draft picks in the NBA, even if they were all second-round picks, is still an asset.
Yeah, but this is a team that's trying to be competitive now. It does nothing for them.
I know their bench unit needs help, but he just was not fitting in with the Sixers this season.
He was really ramping up, man. In his last 10 games before being traded, he was shooting above 50% from 3.
Yeah, they also have other guys on the team that also fit roles that they thought, but like you said, Kyle Lowry was forced into play, but it's also just the grind of the season. I guess they did this trade after, but they would think at this point they would have Paul George available on the court.
Wait a minute. Hold on a second. Because we were thinking earlier, who is to be the meatball of the week? And I came up with a guy, but I'm just realizing this is our first podcast since that news came out. So I think right now there's no better time for my meatball of the week. I'll probably do the other one in a bit, but my meatball of the week is Paul George. who got himself suspended 25 games for, I don't know, what was he
Yeah, I
taking?
think it's pretty
Antidepressant?
it's the worst part about it is it's like the one time where the narrative on him was switching, as in people were starting to become positive about him. Was impacting the team. He
Yeah.
was playing his role and wasn't trying to do too much, and then this happens, and it's like so selfish. And it seems like there's a trend of Philadelphia sports teams all like having a guy doing similar things, and it all happens around the same time. As in, we just had Jose Alvarado miss the entire playoffs for being ineligible with the Phillies because of his suspension. So I think
Dude,
it's really selfish of Paul George.
thank God they didn't do that in the NBA. Thank God it's not 25 game suspension plus playoff ineligibility. Thank God it's not that. I hadn't even
They
thought of
saved some
that.
money on the luxury tax because of it, and then they opened up more money when um, they traded Eric Gordon as well on top
Oh
of
yeah, that's right. That
Jared
was the
McCain.
other
So
trade.
a lot of things that I think we were underrating why this move was made. That one, they picked up 4 draft picks, which is cool, but they seem like they found a 22-year-old solution at the power four position in Dominic Barlow, and they wanted to
Yeah,
convert.
how come he wasn't playing last night? What was the deal with that? No pun intended.
I'm not really sure. I didn't know why Joel was out either.
Yeah, I at first when I saw Joel was out, I was like, oh, I guess this is
I
the
was
first
looking
of
at
the
the
back
betting
to
lines,
back,
trying to put
but
my
no.
NBA bets out. Go follow the Discord and hop in that Discord server. Almost got 1,000 people in there, but I was following the lines, and they had it locked in like the last hour before the game on the East Coast, like 9 o'clock time, with nobody to bet on. And then uh, everything got locked once the Sixers themselves tweeted out the starting lineup, and I saw Andre Drummond was involved with it too. So that allows them to convert Dominic Barlow's contract, which they have done, to a full standard NBA contract instead of the
But
two-way.
they could have found a way to do that without trading McCain. That was not
I mean,
needed.
yeah, they could have, but they also they're not picking up 4 draft picks, and they might have had to, give up draft picks in that scenario too. So at the end of the day, it kind of sucks because how many guys that like one of the initial thoughts that triggered in my brain is how many times do we got to go watch like as a former Sixer that seemed like it had potential just move on from the Sixers and then have success, especially for a guy getting traded to a team that just won the championship or the championship odds favorites again. We just watched one of the more underrated players in recent Sixers memory, Isaiah Joe, go to the Oklahoma City Thunder for practically nothing, and he's become a huge part of what they're doing. So Jared McCain could also fill that role as well. We watched Drew Holiday move on from the Sixers, and then that started pretty much the entire process era after the failed Bynum trade. And then we watched him win a championship. We watched Andre Iguodala win numerous championships after leaving and being the Sixers franchise player. So
You know what?
I'm not going to exaggerate this like moment like Jared McCain's going to be all those things, but I think for a team of what the Oklahoma City Thunder are trying to accomplish, a player like him fits in really well because they're not, loaded up with smaller scoring offensive minded point guards like that on the roster. So it kind of seemed like there was too many mouths to feed with the Sixers. But a lot of the initial like news that was coming out around the trade, because a lot of people were confused, is not only was the Barlow thing, but how they're pretty committed to having an attempt and sounding like they want Quentin Grimes a part of the future, because that was the narrative that kept coming out after the trade, is that they want Quentin Grimes and they want flexibility to be able to try and sign him again, which he's a good player, but I feel like in these moments recently, he hasn't been up to par like before when
Yeah, no,
Joel.
he's been slipping a bit, and McCain was trending upwards, which is why
But at the
I
end of
don't
the
know
day,
if
I
this
think
is going to be like this could turn out to be not to the same level, not to the same degree. In talking about role players, the role player version of it, I could see this turning into choosing Tobias Harris over Jimmy Butler all over again.
I don't know if I mean, I don't think I put
Well,
either.
I'm saying, but it's the role player version of it. Like I'm saying, Jared McCain ends up being a much better player moving forward than Quentin Grimes. I could see that as a possibility. I'm not saying that's what's gonna happen, but I could see it happening.
Well, Quentin
I
Grimes just naturally is what it has a lot more room for growth because I mean Jared McCain, there's nothing I love the pick, but also you have to think another thing that triggered my thought process when I first heard about the trade was I was trying to justify it, and they already got a steal on him in the first round, so to turn him into a first round pick and then 3 more picks with flexibility, I think that in itself, like if you look at it on paper, they still won the entire Jared McCain situation. I mean, another thing that was one of my initial thoughts was how many games did Jared McCain end up playing with the Sixers? And I think it was 14 this year and 19 in his rookie year. So getting 4 draft picks for a guy with what? He had 37 games this year. He really played 37 games already this year? Well, I mean, he had less than 60 games played in his Sixers tenure, and they turned him into that. So asset wise, if you look at it that way, it's not that bad of a trade.
I
We
mean,
know
yeah,
also
if you look at what number he was drafted at and what they flipped him for, then yeah, sure. But the bottom line still is this was a player that could have contributed to a playoff team. And you could say,
yeah, I
well,
agree. I think you can play like
they had too many mouths to feed. But the bottom line is a shooter, right? So even if he's not going out there, constantly getting the ball in his hands and giving you 10, 15, 20 points, to have somebody who you can dish it out to on the perimeter and can hit a big shot for you, especially in the playoffs, that is very valuable to me. That's a kind of player you want to keep on your team for the playoffs, and they just gave it up. And
yeah, I think they
it
look at the
hurts
rest
their
of the
chances this year.
they kind of like look at the rest of the East too and how it would match up. But it just seems like Daryl Morey said himself he sold high on him. I mean, 4 draft picks is a good net, but I feel like there was a lot of room for growth with Jared McCain.
Yeah, that's not selling high
But
with the
was he
potential
going
he
to get
has.
that opportunity in Philadelphia with another thing I was just about to bring up before you just went on that segment of what you were just talking about was did the Sixers even have this in their thought process before they ended up realizing they were going to have a top 3 pick in the NBA draft? They probably would have thought Jared McCain would be on the roster at least for the entirety of his rookie contract or until he was on an expiring deal. And they had to make a decision. But I think VJ Edgecombe was another person who can also handle the ball that changed things. But I don't like getting caught in situations where Kyle Lowry has to, be thrust into a role. And I feel like there's certain teams that have advantages over other teams, but like the Houston Rockets, one of their issues is they don't have a true ball handler because Fred VanVleet's hurt, and they just have a bunch of talented tall guys. But you need a traditional point guard, even if your big men and your forwards can pass. And I think sometimes that may be an issue. But we'll see what happens. I heard also before the trade deadline that Andre Drummond could have been available for trade, but they obviously didn't end up doing that.
I'm glad they didn't get rid of Drummond.
Kelly Oubre was
I
also
think we talked
addressing.
about this. I think we talked about this on the previous podcast, with Embiid not playing back-to-backs and his question mark in terms of health, the importance of having 2 centers on the roster behind him, that being Drummond and Bona. So I am very glad to see
I
they
know the
kept
whole like
Drummond.
week leading up to the trade deadline, Kelly Oubre was like answering like public questions like at his interviews after the game, post and pregame, about the possibility of him being traded, being on an expiring deal. So, but a lot of, like I said, heard is it sounds like Quentin Grimes is going to be a part of their future. So, I mean, the dude can guard 3 different positions. He's really good on offense, and especially when he gets hot, he turns into a microwave. So, I think they like the.
No, don't get me wrong. I do really like Quentin Grimes. He has been worrying me a bit lately, but overall, I do like him. And
I think the fours that they use too have been getting a lot of play. I mean, like Trendon Watford in the beginning of the year had that crazy triple double, and they didn't really even pursue it because then they got Barlow, and then he's been doing his thing, and then Bona also plays the 4 too. So I feel like they're just trying to figure things out. But
I do like when they put Bona out there alongside with Embiid.
Recently, the narrative is like Joel and Tyrese have just kind of been almost going for like 30 each game, and Joel's just really uptaking.
Listen, man, Embiid is he's back. I'm just gonna say he's back. He's dropping 30 plus pretty much every night. I mean, the defense isn't back. He's still not as good defensively as he used to be, but offensively, he's back.
I think before he wasn't a traditional defender before, though. I felt like he was not like a good defender, but I feel like he was more so he would like lead the ground often to block shots and do things like that in the air. But his body's just, that's not the wisest decision for him to do. So he cleaned it up, but he's still a good defender. When Paul George gets back, he's one of the better defenders even at this age still. And then you have VJ as well. So 3 guys like we talked about before being really good defenders in your lineup is going to give you a chance at different times. I mean, maybe versus big lineups, they even would try. I mean, Bona hasn't ever started, I think, with Joel Embiid in the same lineup. And maybe if they need an extra rebound and they can trust the scoring out of the rest of the 4 guys in the lineup, they could look at something like that. But I think Quentin Grimes now is thrust into a role where he has to be a main option off the bench, as well as playing with the starters as well, filling in for that Jared McCain loss. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, they're still sitting. When I updated the banner, it's been like a little bit over a week since we did the podcast. They actually are still the same amount of games back in the race for the East, and they're still sitting at 6th. I'm trying to think of, James Harden just came to the East with the Cavs.
I just wanted to.
He could easily be doing NBA specific stuff with him asking out for trade and then acting like he didn't do it once again. And the Clippers were 17 of their last 21 games up until that point. So I thought that was pretty funny. But also with the pick that the Sixers hold, that reminds me, the Sixers hold that Clippers draft pick and resetting with Darius Garland, who's a lot younger than James Harden. I don't think Darius Garland's ever going to reach the level that James Harden is or has been in the past as a player, but that kind of resets the time window that maybe they build around Darius Garland. That pick's not as good as it once was seen with a 10-year younger player.
Yeah, and you know what? So earlier you brought up Drew Holiday. Now you bring up the 2028 pick. I do have something that I did a lot of research into. Most of it was information I already knew, but I wanted to make sure I had all of this accurate. Something I do want to bring up, right? Because obviously what started the process was Drew Holiday being traded for Nerlens Noel and a 2014 first-round pick, right? So here's the thing. That pick then went into Saric, which went into, Jimmy Butler, which went to it keeps going down the line. It's still going down the line. We're still seeing things unfold from that trade. We're still seeing snowball domino effects, right? So I wanted to this won't take too long, but I wanted to fully recap all of it. Okay. So Nerlens Noel, 2014 first round pick, which gets selected as Elfrid Payton. Then Elfrid Payton gets traded for Dario Saric and a second-round pick, which actually turned out to be Willy Hernangomez and a future first-round 2017 protected pick. Willy Hernangomez, he didn't turn into much. But Dario, Rocco, Jared Bayless, a 2022 second, turned into Jimmy Butler and Justin Patton.
Who's the player from what's the basketball movie with Adam Sandler? Wasn't he the dude?
No, was that Willie or was that Juan?
I'm pretty sure that's his name in the movie, isn't it?
No, his name in the movie is something completely different, but the actor who played him was either Willy Hernangomez or Juan Hernangomez, and I forget which one. But anyway, Jimmy Butler was then signed and traded for Josh Richardson. Josh Richardson and Tyler Bay were traded for Seth Curry. Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, Andre Drummond, a 2027 first, a 2022 first were traded for James Harden and Paul Millsap. Harden, PJ Tucker, and Flip Petrusev were traded for Batum, Rocco, KJ Martin, Marcus Morris, 2028 unprotected first, a 2024 second, a 2029 second, a 2029 pick swap, and a 2026 OKC pick, right? The 2024 pick eventually got traded along with 2 others and Korkmaz for Buddy Hield. Buddy Hield was traded for a 2031 second. The 2026 OKC pick was traded alongside Reggie Jackson for Jared Butler, a 2027 second, 2028 second, and 2 2030 seconds. Now, if we go all the way back, Nerlens Noel was also traded for Justin Anderson, Andrew Bogut, and a 2017 protected first. Justin Anderson was traded for Mike Muscala. Mike Muscala, Landry Shamet, and the 2021 Heat pick, and Wilson Chandler were traded for Tobias, Mike Scott, and Boban. The current capital that the Sixers own as a result of all of this is a 2027 second, that 2028 Clippers pick, a 2028 second, a 2029 Clippers pick swap, a 2029 second, a 2030 second, a 2030 second, and a 2031 second. All of that has come as a result still. So the Drew Holiday trade is still unfolding in a way because we still have all these future picks. This snowball effect is going to go on until the end of time.
I think every team you can dive up to a snowball effect of that sort. So that's just how the NBA is. So
Well,
that's why.
here's the thing. I looked into a lot of other trades from that era. All of them have led to dead ends by now, but this one is still ongoing.
There's so many dudes that just get drafted in the top 5, get forgotten about, and then they're traded for like pretty much nothing in like 2 to 3 years. And like you feel like
Usually,
your
what I
local
found is
team
a
that's
lot
doing
of
that to
times.
you, you feel like a lot of the times that it's just isolated to your team doing that to you. But I mean, the Sixers aren't the only team with guys that like are in the rookie of the year race or winning it, and then the dude's not even on the team anymore. I mean, we also traded the Sixers traded Nikola Vucevic like right after his rookie season, and then he turned into a pretty solid big man, one of the best top 10 big men in the league for over a decade now, and now he's on the Boston Celtics. So it's just full circle, and it seems like the same guys get traded that were highly. I mean, I don't know if you remember how hyped the New York fan base was on Porzingis when they used to call him the unicorn. When was the last time you heard Porzingis considered being the unicorn?
Did he just get traded at the deadline too?
Yeah, he just got traded again to Golden State off of Atlanta.
Yeah,
Got traded to
yeah,
him the
yeah,
offseason.
yeah.
I mean, his prototype, he should be a franchise superstar player, and it just never works out, and then he stops. So it's just crazy. I mean, they had him paired up with Luka. You would have thought that was like at the time that was seen as like like a match made in heaven. I remember when that trade went down and people were
Yeah.
going nuts, and then it materialized into
I
pretty much.
remember people arguing which one of them was going to be the next Dirk, and now it's like to even
I mean,
mention
Anthony Davis
Porzingis
will be Anthony
in the
Davis.
same sentence as Luka would just be blasphemy.
Like, what are the Wizards cooking up with Anthony Davis now there with Trae Young, and then they didn't even trade any of their top lottery picks of recent memory. They
I
still,
don't get, dude. I don't get what the hell the Wizards are doing. I don't see
if it
what they're doing.
materializes correctly, I mean, we all know how it's going to end up with him getting hurt, Anthony Davis. But if it works out with the talent on paper, I mean, the draft where Zachary Rishashir went number 1, and then Alexander Sarr went number 2. I mean, Alexander Sarr is actually good. Zachary Rishashir sucks, is horrible, one of the worst first overall picks in the history. And it was crazy. I remember seeing Zachary Rishashir said, yeah, in the European leagues, I was so athletic, dunking and playing above the rim. But now in the NBA, I'm just an average athletic dude. And that was the number 1 overall pick. And that's how he's talking about himself. So it's crazy. I mean, I feel like teams really waste these assets. So, and a lot of teams, I mean, they either waste the asset on a player that doesn't really impact their team. And a lot of these teams accumulate lottery picks year after year, and then they just stockpile on the roster until they get rid of them. Even the teams that are successful, like the Detroit Pistons just traded Jaden Ivey, who's the 5th overall pick, but they hit on other guys, and the number 1 pick with Cade Cunningham a couple of years ago, and they're the best team in the East right now. But there's just a lot of, teams where there's so much movement in the NBA, and that, I feel like that has to do with there only being like 12 to 13 active players and 15 total players on a roster, and then the way that the contract structures and the way that guaranteed money's set up. I mean, that's why the trade market's so messed up, is because they give these absurd contracts out in the NBA, and then the only way to trade these guys when they become unhappy in 2 to 3 years into the contract is to salary match with a dude that's nowhere near on the level, like 2 to 3 guys like that. So it's wild. But I mean, Jaren Jackson Jr., the defensive player of the year 2 years ago, just got traded in his prime. I mean, the Sixers could have went. Didn't I mention that before about like them trying to get him or like a player like him in the past? But I mean, if they wanted to really go all in at power forward, like you could have got a defensive player of the year candidate, maybe not giving up VJ, and get rid of Paul George. It seemed like a salary dump for what they got back, and they gave up a lot of players in return too. And then
Yeah, well, Daryl Morey is an idiot. He's I don't know. I'm just over it with Daryl Morey. I'm also not too high on Nick Nurse. I mean, how do you have all this talent and you're the second worst third quarter team in the history of the NBA? I'm salty. And Josh Harris, of course, who I mentioned earlier.
The third quarter issues have been happening since before he was even the coach, but he has definitely not helped them improve in that department at all. But yeah, I hate the stretch of the year where they go on the West Coast and you have all the.
This has been the long. Wait, can we talk about that for a second? Because at the start of the season, the NBA just gave the Sixers the most amount of back-to-backs ever. It was like every game was a part of a back-to-back. And now this is the longest West Coast trip, I think, in history. This is absurd. How are they still on the West Coast? Because I want to voice my frustration with that for a second as well.
Yeah, I guess the NBA schedule started getting wonky once they added the in-season tournament. So I feel like having all that, there's teams where if you win the in-season tournament and then you have to play in the play-in, how many extra games are you playing as opposed to other teams in the NBA? Like you're playing almost an extra, 4 to 5 games. So that's pretty crazy. But I guess that's what you deserve being a play-in team. But they're right on the threshold with the season counting down 53 games in. They're just on the cutoff of not being a play-in team. So I feel like this team, I don't know. There's two ways to look at it if they make the play-in, as in
Yeah,
get
this
Paul
this
George
West
back.
Coast trip. Sorry, not to cut you off, but this West Coast trip started on Monday, February 2nd against the Clippers. It is now February 10th, and they're about to play their. Oh wait, no, okay. So it's over now. Last night was the final game, but they played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 consecutive games over the course of 1 week, all on the West Coast. I mean,
Yeah,
that is
try and
just
log jam it in. But if they make the
that's
sixth seed,
absurd.
I feel like if they don't make the sixth seed and they make the play-in, I guess there's two ways to look at it. Like a team that has their star players that they rely on a lot, a history of them having to play more games with their injury vulnerability would probably not be good. But then again, Paul George coming back off suspension, maybe it gives them a little bit
He's
more
got
chance.
20 games left in his suspension, by the way. But anyway, before we move on to some football talk, I do want to give my second meatball of the week. And my second meatball of the week is actually, wait, hold on. What was his name one more time? This is what happens when it's a sport you don't really watch. Kane Tomlinson, sorry. My second meatball of the week is Kane Tomlinson. And when I say a sport I don't really watch, I don't think anybody really watches it. I'm referring to Bare Knuckle FC. But anyway, Kane Tomlinson, he fought Philadelphia native Johnny Garbarino this past Saturday. And leading into the fight, Kane Tomlinson, he had a lot to say. He had a lot to say. He even said, fuck Philly. And, he had a big mouth on him. And then he goes into the fight. And now, granted, in the second round, Johnny Garbarino, a little dirty, picked him up and he dropped him, right? Kane Tomlinson, he proceeded to flop. All right, that is what it is. What it is. He laid there forever, like he was seriously hurt from it, flopping, whatever. But then through the rest of the fight, anytime Garbarino got near him, he would just hit the deck and play possum or play dead, or I don't know. He would try and get some sort of whistle out of it. I don't know, but it kept going on and on and on until eventually the ref just stopped the fight. It was absolutely ridiculous. It was a horrible thing to watch. Kane Tomlinson, considering you were talking all that smack before that, and then you did that, you're my second meatball of the week.
Yeah, it doesn't usually go well when you voice your frustrations over an entire community, especially as a tight-knit community of the sports community of Philadelphia. But let's transition into some Eagles talk. We obviously have a huge update. They finally found an offensive coordinator in Sean Mannion. We talked about, I don't think you saw it coming at all. I kind of saw a little bit of rumblings, but I think we briefly mentioned it a little bit, but no possibilities of him not being a coach anymore. And that's Jeff Stoutland no longer being a coach of the Philadelphia Eagles and then bringing in
that's a major
new
blow.
offensive line coach. It kind of makes sense. It seems like before they kept things like in-house, and a lot of guys, like, they would hire a new assistant, but they had a lot of the guys still on the staff be retained. But now they're allowing Sean Mannion to bring his guy in. And I actually heard a lot of glowing reviews about Sean Mannion, even though he's a little bit on the younger side, but he comes from an interesting coaching tree of the McVay offensive scheme. And a lot of people, there's been stories about him being quizzed as a player and as a coach. And I think he was still in the NFL as early as 2 to 3 years ago, playing backup quarterback. But it seems like a really smart guy. If he was physically able to, he probably would still be playing in the NFL. One of those guys that just floats around for his mindset and what he's able to provide mentally to the game and to a team. So it's going to be a new era for the Philadelphia Eagles. We'll see how Jalen Hurts adapts to that. Another offensive coordinator for him, obviously. It seemed like Jeff Stoutland's voice was kind of getting drowned out as the run game coordinator last year, and they obviously didn't have the same success. The offensive line was not as good. I can't point all the fingers to Jeff Stoutland in that department. I think there's a lot of different variables to that equation, but for a guy that's, lasted through numerous coaching regimes and was there since like the Chip Kelly days, and when Jason Peters was coming to Philadelphia and everything like that, it's pretty crazy for them to go. But I mean, you can't expect for everybody to stay around forever. We also talked about Vic Fangio and his how long he's expected to be with the Eagles, and it seems like his time's also running out as well. And seems like this can very well be his last season as the Eagles defensive coordinator. So with the foundation that it seems like they actually had on the team with Jeff Stoutland, and I mean Nick Sirianni, obviously we can't discredit him. He's been a fundamental piece of the Eagles, bringing them to 2 Super Bowls in his time being there. But the foundation of Vic Fangio and Jeff Stoutland being the strong suits of the team, it seems like those candles are kind of, diffusing.
Yeah, no, listen, I'm at the worried point when it comes to the Philadelphia Eagles. I think it was on this podcast previously where I said, the one constant through the 2 Super Bowl victories, from 2017 to 2024, has been Howie Roseman and Jeff Stoutland. And now with Stoutland gone, it's no longer a guarantee that – I mean, it's what felt like a guarantee that virtually any offensive lineman they would bring in would become a great offensive lineman, and that's now gone, They do still have a great offensive line that they can live off of for a while, but I no longer have that confidence of, whoever they bring in is just going to perform great on this O-line because –
I don't know if I agree with that statement you just made about a good offensive line they can live off for a while. I think we also just heard rumors about Landon.
Well, that's what I was going to bring up next. We also, we did hear that Landon Dickerson is contemplating retirement, but we'll see how that eventually unfolds.
I'm not even without that even being a rumor, I would think that he maybe has 2 to 3 good years left, if that, just the way that his body's holding up. Cam Jurgens looked horrible this past year. Lane Johnson's only getting older. Jordan Mailata is getting a little bit older, but I feel good about him for the next 3 to 4 years. So, like we said, I mean, they could use their first resource on that. There's also another couple things. So I've been looking at different media assets, and it's funny when I first started doing podcasting, like 2016. And I was like recording on SoundCloud when everybody's favorite rappers were dropping on SoundCloud too. And I was making sports podcasts in my basement. It's funny, you would never say like, oh, I watched the podcast with this player, and this is what was said, or I went to this person's Instagram or Facebook page and I saw this post and it made me think about this. But that's the media era that we live in 2026, is that's where you get that's the source for this information. And I saw a couple things. I was watching the Exciting Mike's podcast, and it was when they were at Radio Row for the Super Bowl. And Reed Blankenship was talking about moving back to Tennessee. And a lot of the dialogue subliminally in that podcast sounded almost like a 98% chance that he would not be back with the Philadelphia Eagles. So I thought that was very interesting. Even when they directly asked him if he would be back, he said he doesn't know what holds for him. Cooper DeJean was asking him what he needs to get better on in the offseason, and he said, I kind of want to keep that private. But I thought the biggest thing was he was moving back. I think he just had a child or something like that, but he was moving back out of Philly, and it sounded a lot of the dialogue like he wasn't going to be back in Philly. So I thought that was very interesting. Also, I know you saw the rumored package of what Jalen Carter and the Jalen Carter trade for Micah Parsons, what that was rumored to be.
I did not see that. No, I did not.
It's funny because I saw publications talking about it and like posting about it afterwards, but I actually watched the Bleacher Report podcast, heard it, and I was like, wow, that's very interesting. And then I saw like a couple hours later when everybody started watching the podcast, it was Bryce Young, AJ Brown, and Micah Parsons on the same podcast. And it was on Micah's Bleacher Report podcast. And he was talking about how close he was going to Philly and that the trade was for Jalen Carter and draft picks, but he wanted to come to Philly to play with Jalen Carter. And obviously the Dallas Cowboys went in a different direction and didn't want to trade him to the Eagles. And we heard about the incentive in the deal for him to not go there and all that stuff. So I just thought that was interesting as well. But yeah, well, I guess we'll have to see. But I think there's a good reality that they're going to have to be looking for a new safety and to replace Reed Blankenship. And I feel like they don't really have a complete lock, even though they spent a second-round pick on Andrew Makuba, who looked flashed. I mean, the Chiefs game, he looked tremendous this year, and there was different games that he looked really good, but he's also coming off a pretty significant injury as well. So I feel like shoring up that back end, they definitely want to have a shored up back end with the two corners that they have in place there. But it's going to be interesting to see how they handle that specific position group, because it seems like not only one guy they're looking for, and question marks with Andrew Makuba coming back from injury, but like I said, a lot of things pointed towards Reed Blankenship, sounding like there wasn't a good chance with him going back to Philadelphia.
Yeah, and that, like, that's something I was fearing. Not like Reed Blankenship is like a true franchise player, but of course, as of right now, there isn't really a next of kin to Reed Blankenship. That's a position they'll have to address. And I just hate to see the exciting whites get broken up. I mean, that makes me very upset.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about before, Reed Blankenship is a very likable person. I feel like he's very accountable too. That's what fits him well, because he doesn't try to act like he's anything what he's not. He's a very solid player, but he's not anything, I would say, special. But he does have intangibles that do make him special. And I feel like his mindset is that, but athletically, they could upgrade that position. But he's somebody that also seems like he took a leadership role. And that was one thing that they talked about in a couple of podcasts previously of Exciting Mics is Cooper DeJean credited Reed Blankenship. They both asked each other what they improved upon from the other person's perspective during the season. And Cooper pointed to Reed Blankenship stepping up with the leadership role. So, I mean, they already lost vets in the locker room with like Slay and guys like that. Brandon Graham. I mean, I don't think Brandon Graham's going to be coming back for another season. I think it'd be crazy if he did, but he played well this year, but coming off like what he was coming off of, I thought he thinks that he was just going to, add another Super Bowl trophy to his case. But that was another thing that I know Micah Parsons grew up an Eagles fan, but he was also like just looking at AJ Brown in the podcast, and AJ's like, how he reacts. He's like, dude, what? Like, and he's like, how are you guys not in the Super Bowl again? Like, how did the Eagles not make the Super Bowl with how good they are? And talking about Bryce Young was also talking about how difficult it was to game plan for the Eagles when they played them. And then AJ made their mark like, the Panthers almost beat us, and that's when things were looking bad, and all those rumors were coming out. So I thought it was all funny and everything like that. But if we mark down like all the significant changes they're obviously going to go into the season with Jalen Hurts as the quarterback. I don't think that's really in question besides some Saudi fans. Running back isn't really a question.
WIP.
With the money. Wide receiver is possibly a question with outside of Devontae Smith. Tight end's a question with Dallas Goedert's time in Philadelphia. Offensive line as a whole is a question, especially on the perimeter, one of the most important positions at right tackle with Lane Johnson's future. Pass rushing looks pretty good right now with the contributions of Jalix Hunt, but they still have some question marks there. Interiorly, they seem good, but they got to make a decision on Jordan Davis, Moro Jomo, obviously playing well. Linebacker, Nakobe Dean, not really a question because they drafted a first-round pick in Jahad Campbell and have Zach Bond, but Nakobe Dean, they probably don't have the money or the resources to bring him back because it seems like they'd be, trying to add to a position they already have a lot of assets at. And then we talked about the safety. So if we go down the line, the only thing that's really a complete, lock of what it's going to be is probably quarterback and running back next season.
I wouldn't say those are the only positions that are a lock. Like if you look at the entire position, like you obviously can't say the entire cornerback room is a lock, right? Because obviously you need a corner too. But if you look at certain in terms of position groups, yeah, I guess quarterback is the only lock, right? Running back.
Well, we talked about
the entire position group is a
Regime's
lock.
ability to play safety, so maybe they did let him play more safety looks this year and used them that way. Maybe they could use it like that.
I would say the interior D line, although wait, Jordan Davis, he's a free agent, right?
He's he's going into his 5th year, so.
Okay, so I think interior D line, yeah, but anyway, I think now might be a good time to talk about what we just watched on Sunday. which, by the way, I think is the second worst Super Bowl I've watched in my lifetime, behind
Yeah,
the
it was a
Rams
very
Patriots Super Bowl.
it was
It
a
got a
very
little interesting towards the end, but the first three quarters were just painful.
yeah, it was really a tough game to watch. Just like the game was like close but not entertaining like by any stretch of the imagination. Kind of played out similar to how we thought. There was no quarterback that really did anything crazy. Kenneth Walker was just pretty much running all over him, and then the Pats' offensive line just looked absolutely horrible. And we've seen
Yeah,
teams.
Will Campbell, man. Will Campbell had a
It
bad
was said that he
showing.
had an injury going in, but we've seen this trend of like Jaden Daniels bringing the Commanders to the NFC Championship. Jamar Chase going to the Super Bowl rookie year. Penny Sewell being the fifth pick or sixth pick, I think, after Jamar Chase, and the Lions being really good immediately after. We see teams drafting high in the draft immediately. Nick Bosa, the 1 year when they drafted him, they were in the Super Bowl after picking him second. So we've seen top 5 picks and top 10 picks like immediately work out for teams in the NFL. But the one thing that kind of like had people questioning if Will Campbell was going to go as high as he was is just like brute strength of him anchoring as a offensive tackle in the pass protection game. And if Philadelphia Eagles fans need a translation, it was the same issue that Andre Dillard had back in the day. But obviously, Will Campbell was a lot more touted prospect than that. But both first round picks, and he had one of the worst games I've ever seen from an offensive tackle. And it wasn't just him; there was other guys out there too. Milton Williams also is a beast, though. Milton Williams handles business.
Well,
For the
I'll tell you who was the MVP of that game for the Patriots, who I kind of, feel sorry for in a way because he really played his ass off, and his team ended up losing. That's Christian Gonzalez. He had a phenomenal game. It really is a shame for
Yeah, it's
him.
funny because a lot of people that aren't like die hard NFL fans that even there's so many different tiers. I feel like of being an NFL fan, like fantasy, knowing every team, like being obsessed, watching NFL Network, getting all the information all the time. And people saw Christian Gonzalez Madden rating to start the year at like 96, and like, dude, he's not that good. And like, bro, if you saw some of the plays he was making in the Super Bowl, like you
He was
see
all over it, man. He had that
why he
one
was one of those
diving
top
pass
draft picks too.
breakup. He
Yeah, the
looked
one
really
they had
good.
the still image of him breaking up the pass, and it was insane. It was like it's not anywhere near the same play as Brian Dawkins with like the Superman tackle out of bounds, but it was like the full extension clip of like him like fully extended making that play, and it was very impressive. Um, but yeah, it seems like what I was thinking to myself about these two teams in the Super Bowl, NFC and AFC wise, I don't like the Seahawks are pretty good, but the way that they played versus the Patriots, I think a lot of teams could have beat the Seahawks, and I think they got ranked a top 5 team by ESPN in Super Bowl history, which was pretty crazy to me. But I was thinking to myself, I think there's a really good chance neither of these teams are getting relatively close to the Super Bowl next season again. So I feel like
Yeah, I think I
my
saw
the Eagles got to pounce on the opportunity of it being pretty open right now.
I thought it was insane that I forget who posted it, but like they posted like the way too early best odds to go to the Super Bowl next year or whatever it was, and they had the Seahawks at number 1, and it's like, all right, we can't just default to the Super Bowl winner being the favorite to win the Super Bowl next year. One, it's rare to win back-to-back Super Bowls. It's really, really difficult. And the Seahawks aren't exactly a team that's like, if any team's going to go back-to-back, it's going to be this team. Like, they had a great season. They won the Super Bowl, but I don't see them as like a big threat for the next season to come. Or
the way that the Patriots,
especially with Kenneth Walker possibly leaving in free agency, the
after
MVP of the Super Bowl.
After that game, I mean, like if you need a running back and you have the money to spend, you're going to spend it on Kenneth Walker. And like, dude, he's really good. He's so fast, and he's actually like low key physical too. He's a really good player.
By the way, my third meatball of the week is actually going to be Chris Collinsworth for saying that Kenneth Walker went deep inside that hole and then bounced it outside. So Chris Collinsworth, you're my third meatball of the week.
You're so consistent with that behavior. It's crazy with like any slippage of words. I don't even like crazy, but I had a complete thought that got ruined by that. Well, I was saying the Patriots, the way they're constructed, like the Commander, like they're like a better version of the Commanders, as in like They had a couple young players lead them to what they did this year. Obviously, a young franchise quarterback, but a lot of that team is made up of like older guys that I don't know how their longevity with the team is going to be. And then the Seahawks, I mean, they're pretty good. They're definitely good. I feel like the NFC is definitely the powerhouse of the AFC right now. Like the AFC, I feel like the narrative is finally slowly dying down of like, just because you're considered a top 5 quarterback in the league outside of Patrick Mahomes doesn't mean that your team's going to make it to the Super Bowl. And, I feel like people are still starting to die on Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen ever winning a Super Bowl hill. I mean, Drake May just made it to the Super Bowl out of the AFC with all those guys to make it. So
not only that,
the Bengals aren't getting any significantly better anytime soon with the money that they have tied up. I think the best team to get back, I mean, I would put my money out of like that narrative of the top quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes could easily find himself back in the Super Bowl if they spend the 9th overall pick again wisely.
Well, the thing I was going to say is not only that, but, the excuse for guys like Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow, even though he did go to a Super Bowl, and Josh Allen, people were saying for years, oh, well, it's tough to get past Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. Well, none of them had that excuse this year. The Chiefs missed the playoffs. And yet again, those guys failed to get it done. And meanwhile, you let a young Drake May, who ended up finishing the postseason with one of the worst postseason runs by a quarterback to compete in at least 3 games of all time. So I mean those excuses go completely out the window now.
Even like the Rams were like supposed to the Rams Panthers might have been like seen as like potentially the biggest blowout of the playoffs, and like the Panthers came 3 points away from beating the Rams. And I feel like the Rams are set up pretty well because they made that trade with the Falcons, so they have 2 first-round picks. But Matt Stafford's only getting older. I feel like a lot of teams missed an opportunity this year. I mean, Matt Stafford, his time with
the Rams, Eagles being one of them, honestly.
His time with the Rams has already been a success, but I feel like the NFC is what you have to look out for. I mean, the 49ers.
Well, the NFC has now won back-to-back Super Bowls, so there's something.
Yeah, and they were talking about it, like I told you, that podcast with the Bleacher Report, Micah playing for 2 NFC teams in his career now, Bryce Young being the franchise quarterback in an NFC team, then A.J. Brown being with the Eagles for as long as he has. They were all agreeing. I know they're all NFC players, but like they were talking about like it's not even close right now. The NFC is better than the AFC.
Yeah, no, I would certainly agree with that. Anyway, I'm not sure if you had another NFL topic.
Yeah, last thing I thought was interesting. The Cowboys are going to potentially franchise tag George Pickens, but also haven't ruled out trading him. So obviously he was really good this season. That can't be denied, but it didn't lead to any team results. So I'm not really too threatened by it, but I do think it would be funny if he ended up moving on. And
as long as Jerry Jones is the owner of the Cowboys, I'm just not threatened by them.
They do have they have another top draft pick. I think they had the 12th pick again, which they had last year. So we'll see how they spend that. But I mean, they had the worst defense arguably in the entire NFL. So they'll definitely have to shore that up. Their new defensive coordinator is a Philly guy, Christian Parker. So I expect them to be a better unit, but we'll see how that goes. But we got baseball right around the corner. Philly's 11 days away from their first spring training game on Saturday, the 21st. There's been a little bit of news about Zach Wheeler's availability, probably not in the beginning of the season, but like the very beginning of the season, but maybe a couple months in. Still trying to trade Nick Castellanos, but it doesn't seem like they have anybody biting, but they're trying to do it in the next 11 days before they get to training camp, or even sooner than that, because that's the first game, but they'll be reporting earlier than that. I mean, we'll see with this Phillies team. Rob Thompson just said that he feels like at this point this year, where they were at this point last year, he thinks they're better. I mean,
I don't buy that at all.
Does not having Ranger Suarez and trading that out
for no Ranger. Zach Wheeler isn't going to be available to start the year. The offense is only getting older. I feel it just feels to me like one of those comments that you just make it just to make it, because it's not like you're going to say, oh well, I don't think this team is going to be as good this year, or but so of course you're going to say that, but it just feels like one of those comments that you're like, yeah, okay.
And I mean, they're still like They're the third favorites to win the National League behind the Mets and obviously the Dodgers. The Dodgers are plus 115 to win the National League, which is insane. Mets barely in front of them. The Braves just lost Ozuna, which he was not good last year, but he ended up moving on, so that loses a little power. I feel like I was so fearful of that 2022 Braves team being like consistently power bats and hitting all those home runs for years on end. And Matt Olson has not been that 50-plus home run guy. Austin Riley's been banged up. Acuna's been banged up. I mean, the Braves, like the threat of the Braves nowadays doesn't feel like the same sting. I feel like now we had our eyes like shifted, obviously playing them in the playoffs twice in a row, back-to-back seasons, and getting the better hand of them, heated up the rivalry. But I feel like the shift and the focus of like the past 18 months has really been the rivalry with the Mets and what the Mets are creating with the Phillies and them having the upper hand on the Phillies as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like during our childhood, that was the big rivalry, Phillies Mets, and then when the Phillies finally became good again, it was Phillies Braves, and now we're back to Phillies Mets again. And I do think it's funny that, at no point has like Phillies Nationals or Phillies Marlins been a rivalry.
I was just thinking to myself when we're talking about this, like it's so crazy that the Nationals have won a more recent, even though having Bryce Harper on their team, but even with that said, they've won a more recent World Series title than the Phillies, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, and it's crazy too because it was really just a one-off season.
That's what I'm saying. Like the thought behind that comment is like the Nationals have never been like a consistent threat to the Phillies at any point of our
that was like the only year they were good, and they went on to win it all, and then proceeded to get rid of all of the talent.
I remember going to Montreal Expos games growing up versus the Phillies, so it's crazy. I mean, the division wasn't always the same, but the constants were the Braves and the Mets, and the Mets, obviously, there's some history with like playoff chokes from either side, so that's what heats it up. But they're not even just like on the field, but they're also like competing for the same players off the field as well. So that seems like what's heating it up. But the Braves are obviously always dangerous because you know how I feel about Ronald Acuna. I mean, I think he's just one of the best players. He also made an appearance, I think, apparently in the Super Bowl performance. I think he was in the background of the Bad Bunny halftime show. Like someone pointed him out there. But the Braves, like also their second baseman, Ozzie Albies, was not that good last year either. I mean, they have decent pitching, but at the end of the day, I'm not really threatened by them. And the Mets, I mean, the Mets just seem like they keep the Mets have, I don't know if I would consider it exactly what or similar to what the Eagles do, but it seems like recently the Mets have not, obviously the Dodgers, but LA is a huge market. New York's a huge market too, but the Mets have to deal with the Yankees in the same market as opposed to the Dodgers dealing with the Angels. But I feel like the Mets have been arguably the most aggressive MLB team in upgrading the roster in like the past 2 years.
Yeah, the Mets are they're definitely a threat. They're like they're a serious hurdle.
Because if we go back to 2022 when the Phillies made the World Series, and that season when they beat the Braves, like the Mets made the playoffs, and I think they upset the Dodgers that year, but like no one was really like, really threatened by the Mets. Like nothing on their roster pointed to them being like upper echelon of the MLB. And then
the Mets and the Knicks, the Mets, not to bring up basketball again, but the Mets and the Knicks to me are like so similar, right? I look at them both. Obviously, they're both New York teams. And
yeah, but
it's similar in the way that hold on. It's similar in the way that like, in recent years, the Philly team has struggled against them in the playoffs. They've lost to them. They've been a thorn in our side. But then they're also the team that just can't get it done. Even though they embarrass us and they make it past us with ease, they can't get it done after that. And on top of that, they're both teams that haven't won since the 80s. I think both of them, the last time they won was the 80s. They're just so similar, and they wear the same colors. They're just so similar to me. They're like,
I don't know if I would consider Cat like a mega superstar, but like the difference is the Mets actually get these players that they fantasize about in recent memory, and like the Knicks fantasize about these NBA players that are never coming to New York that they say like Giannis or you know what I mean, like they make up these things. So
yeah, I think I remember hearing. I also remember like the year that Zion was drafted. Knicks fans were like really getting excited about getting the number 1 pick and taking Zion. And the thing that annoyed me too was like they like acted like they had the number 1 pick in hand because they were the number 1 worst team, but the draft odds for the 3 worst teams is the same at 14.5%. So the fact that they like acted like they had the best odds to land Zion, and then they were like shocked they didn't, and the national media was like, "Wow, the Knicks really can't do anything right." It's like they never, it was never probable.
Yeah.
I remember thinking that was absolutely absurd at the time, but yeah, Zion was.
It seems like the only team that really, the 2 teams that like creeped into the upper echelon of the National League and the MLB recently in the past couple of years, it stayed the same. But like the Brewers and the Cubs kind of are a little bit in the outside of the conversation, but it's pretty much stayed the same. Like teams that are up there, with the Braves just being banged up and injured, but like being talent wise up there with the rest of the team. So I don't really see the race for the National League being anything too different than like the same 4 teams. And I guess you would alternate like the Brewers having a good year with, maybe the Braves getting back to full strength and being good. I think the Cubs just are a little bit outside of that equation. The Padres, I don't think, are there anymore. They also lost, what's his name in the offseason too? I think the Giants signed, the Giants, I guess, maybe creeping into that conversation a little bit after the trade they made last year with Devers, but they also just signed, what's his name? I'm drawing a complete blank. He was on the Marlins, one of my favorite players that we were hyping up, talking about the MVP a couple years ago on the podcast when he was batting like 380.
Yeah, like outside of the Los Angeles Dodgers, there isn't really that like one team or like those select teams that are like, oh, well, these are going to be the guys that are going to make the deep playoff runs and the Phillies are going to get caught behind them, but the issue still being this is not a Phillies team that I don't really have much confidence in. Like I mentioned everything earlier, right? No Wheeler to start the season. Rangers gone. Offense is getting older. The offense that isn't getting older is getting progressively worse. That being guys like Alec Bohm and Bryson.
I feel like the bullpen's not like, it's not fair to judge the bullpen because there's always like 3.
Well, the bullpen. Listen, the bullpen. I mean, you look at.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
Ron
gonna
and
be happy about
Alvarado and Kirkering.
I feel
like
I don't want to hear Kirkland's name mentioned, but I'll feel confident about the 2 guys they have anchored down at the top. But I feel like the bullpen, there's always 3 to 4 random guys they start using that don't even have MLB experience. It's just so hard to judge that, but you can more so judge the starting rotation. Plus, they have guys that go both ways, as in being closers and starting pitchers. So, but the guy I kept referring to, I don't know why I was drawing a complete blank on his name. Luis Arias actually just got signed by the Giants. So they got Harrison Bader and Luis Arias. That's 2 solid foundation pieces to like some of the star power they have at the top of the roster. So maybe they're a little bit competitive. And they're like the least talked about, like considered dynasty in recent sports memory. The Giants, the San Francisco Giants, winning 3 World Series in like a 5-year span. And I feel like they never get mentioned for that credit, but they had outrageous pitching in that time period. Even guys like Tim Lincecum falling off, they were still winning. But what do you think it would take to take down like what type of team would it take? Like an offensive team that outscores the Dodgers? Because that's going to be tough to be. Or do you think it would be more so just like the best pitching that you could possibly pair together?
I would say an offensive team, right? Because if you take a great pitching team against that Dodgers team, then if it's a team that isn't really loaded on offense. I mean, this Dodgers offense is so good that even if you have great pitching, they can still 100% jump out to a lead, and you're going to need
and it's the non-likely suspects
catch up to them, right? So
it's like it's like Rojas hitting a home run for them. It was like I keep referencing Tommy Edman winning National League series, championship series MVP. They have like random guys that step up for them. So it's like they're a threat 1 through 9. And then they just keep adding more talent. And they also added, to make the Mets worse, didn't they added Edwin Diaz as their closer or to their bullpen in the offseason as well.
Yeah, so they're gonna be extremely tough to take down. Now, one final topic I want to just bring up really fast. Obviously, not only is spring training approaching, but so is the World Baseball Classic. I was wondering who you think is the favorite to win the World Baseball Classic this year.
I saw a lot of teams having like issues with, or certain teams having issues with being like insured. There's like an insurance issue, so there's certain players that may not even be competing because of that. I mean, the one thing I will tell you, I probably won't put my money on Team USA. I probably will not be. I probably put it on the Dominican Republic. Don't they have a pretty nasty
The
line?
funny thing about the Dominican Republic, they have a lot of current and former Phillies, right? You look at
Well, real
the
quickly, let
pitching.
me interject. That's why the Italian national hockey team is plus 3,500 because their only guy with NHL experience was a prospect that never played in the NHL. So that's why
That
they're
is
so underdog.
that is quite funny. But yeah, so the Dominican Republic, looking at their pitchers, they have Gregory Soto, Christopher Sanchez, Sir Anthony Dominguez, and Carlos Estevez, all, of course, former or current Phillies, the one current Philly being Christopher Sanchez. You look at their
You think
infield.
Johan Rojas is going to start over Onel Cruz or Julio Rodriguez?
No. But looking at their infield, they have former Philly Carlos Santana. And then, yeah, of course, in the outfield, they have
I
current
think
Philly
Carlos Santana
Johan
might play.
Rojas.
Carlos Santana might get 3 at bats. He's 41 or 2 years old now. Utility
And
listed.
Albert Pujols is a manager for them. That's something I didn't even know until double checking the roster.
I saw that Jorge Posada is taking a role with the Italian team, and he's Puerto Rican. So some people were confused about
Hey,
that.
listen, I will be, of course, rooting for USA and Italy, although Italy does not stand a chance. But other than that, I will be rooting for USA.
I think that one dude, there's a couple underrated guys on this Dominican Republic roster, but that shortstop on Arizona is a really good player, Geraldo Perdomo. He's like be the most underrated player in the entire MLB right now. So I feel like the Diamondbacks can make a little smoke too because they have a good foundation of the infield. But the Phillies are still like getting the moral of the story is that we'll end on is the Phillies still get like respect from as much as everybody knows the Dodgers are just a complete outlier. The Phillies still get the respect of being a top 5 favorite team of all these teams. So we'll see how it goes. They're gonna have to update the roster, but they've been playing this like cat and mouse game of like, they don't want to move on from the nucleus core, but they don't add too much to it. And then if they do, it's seen as the wrong move. It's just, all over the place. So I think the second that they start struggling a little bit this year, people will start alluding to the Aaron Nola contract, bringing back JT, and just how everything just kind of feels like the same that it was before. But the only things that can really change all this smoke is if their prospects show up and actually are touted the way that they are. And they're going to have to do that. I mean, how can you be a better team when you don't really significantly upgrade the roster and just kind of running it back and everyone's getting a little bit older and you just add like a 32-year-old guy that's a pretty good player, but at a position that you kind of had a similar player at before in Adolis Garcia. So we'll see, but even if there's growing pains at the beginning of the year, which there always will be, and then the Phillies are one of those teams that goes on like this month spurt of fire play, and then they go back to, mediocre play right after. I'll deal with the growing pains if it means them getting these prospects up to them. I'll be as quick as possible and letting them get the experience.
Yeah, so we'll see how everything unfolds.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, I don't know how much stock when we can put into them still being in a championship window because at the end of the day,
no, I would say they're champions. I mean,
teams that are favored in front of them,
until they build around their current young prospects, which will be a few years from now. I don't really see them having much of a championship window anymore.
Yeah, I mean, all these teams that are favored in front of them, they're favored for a reason because they are upgrading the rosters and the Phillies aren't. So I mean, all the issues.
I mean, this
Even
is
teams
this is like the
the
third offseason in a row that they haven't improved.
I mean,
the
the Dodgers
roster.
have an outfield with Teoscar Hernandez and Andy Pye has 2 all-star level talent players, and then we'll just go add Kyle Tucker in free agency. The Phillies have absolute disarray in the outfield. It's like,
they don't even add at the deadline other than Duran being really the only time throughout.
Well, I mean, I can't fault them that this year as a whole. I mean, not only did they – there's a rare time, like a rare case that you get to upgrade the roster in the now and for the future, and I feel like that Johan Duran trade checked all those boxes.
Well, that's what I mean. Outside of the Duran trade, and also, Bader was a good deadline trade for them as well. But outside of that, the 2023 deadline, the 2024 deadline, they did absolutely nothing. They actually made the team worse during the 2024 deadline, and Trey Turner was the last good free agent signing. So they really have done nothing to improve the team, other than, hopefully some of these draft picks work out, like Justin Crawford and Gage Wood and Dante Nori. But yeah, they don't really have much of a chance this season, in my opinion. I think this is it. I think they win somewhere between 85 to 90 games and probably a wild card exit.
Who would you put your money on being the first prospect out of all these guys to play for the Phillies?
I probably Andrew Painter. Maybe Crawford. I don't know. I think it's between Painter and Crawford.
We shall see. So thank you guys for tuning in to episode 129 of the Paisan Sports podcast. We'll be back next week for episode 130. See you guys then.